Good day, ladies and gentlemen. This is Blue Knight 7 of the Blue Knight cast, and I wanted to spend episode 31 today talking about a game series near and dear to my heart, going back to the days when I was a little knight. The Legend of Zelda, which is having a 40th anniversary later this week. Now, my last episode, I talked about the possibility of having 40th anniversary announcements for this series during a general Nintendo Direct, if we indeed have one this week. But regardless of whether there is or not, I just wanted to spend some time talking about my memories with the series, what it means to me, hopes for the future. And not predictions per se, just hopes for the future. If you like what you're hearing so far, please like, subscribe, comment, hit the notification bell, whatever you want to do. I am seeking engagement here. This has been very good for me personally, just being able to do this stuff and find some time to do this stuff regular, and I would like my channel to grow. So if you like anything that you listen to here, listen to me ramble about video games. Please do anything below. I could use the engagement. But The Legend of Zelda. My very first memories of this game goes back to when I was something like, I want to say 6 years old. Maybe 7. Playing the original The Legend of Zelda for the NES years after it was first released, because it was first released, I was still like an infant. But I would play it on a friend of mine who had an NES. And he would just let me kind of play it, and he didn't really care if I messed the save file up or not, I don't think. I think he would start a new one looking back. That is something unique that first game had that you didn't always see on the NES. It may have been the first to have save cartridges, save files, because the cartridge had a battery backup. But I would just start in the middle of the map and I would just wander around, and to me it was, I know it's simple by today's standards, but to me it was awe-inspiring just to work that map and just to go from one screen to the next, and every screen would be different. I swear, I thought that map had to be limitless, because my young mind couldn't perceive the limits of that small map, if that makes sense. It really felt like I was exploring this digital video game pixelated world. And it really felt like a game where anything could happen. And I know it feels kind of limited today, but back then, this was just, for my poor young mind, it was amazing. You know, the dungeons were hard for me. Just navigating the enemies in the overworld was a challenge that I would play. You know, that's more what I was playing, just trying to wander around the overworld and see what was on the next screen. That was The Legend of Zelda for me years ago. Did I own the game back then when I was a little kid? No. If you ask me why, I got the NES kind of late into its life, and there were some games I had, and a lot of them were some obvious ones like Super Mario Brothers / Duck Hunt. I had Super Mario Brothers 3. Skipped 2, got 3. I had the Ninja Turtle games, because I was really into Ninja Turtles. I had, Battletoads. But, there was a lot of NES games that kind of passed me by at the time. And I kind of got to revisit them a little more so later in the Wii years with the Virtual Console. But you know, I had NES. I had a few games. I rented some games. I played some games my friends had. The Legend of Zelda being one of them. And then I kind of switched over to the Super NES in '93 with Star Fox being a major motivator for me. Um, but yeah, The Legend of Zelda, amazing game. Zelda 2, it was sort of a game I knew about, but I wanted to get the first Zelda first if I was to get a Zelda game, if that makes sense. And again, I just never actually acquired either one of them at the time. And so I just kind of skipped that game. There are Zelda games I haven't played. I'll admit that. And I'm not even talking about every game I played today, just the ones that really impacted me. But that was a major one. Link to the Past, played it. Um, it was kind of, and for me, it was a game where, yeah, it was better. I don't know if it really blew my mind in the same way the first game did, if that makes sense. But it was a game I played. It was a game I enjoyed. Um, the next big moment in Zelda history for me was Ocarina of Time. And I say that because there's multiple reasons with that game, and it's still one of my top 10 games of all time, period. But that when it came out in 1998, I feel like I spent the years that I did playing video games up to that point not was I played them, I enjoyed them, I wasn't very good at them. Every now and then there was a game that somehow it really connected with me and I could play well and make progress efficiently in the game. And you get my point. Like I could actually get good at it. Before that, I would have said Rock and Roll Racing and Star Fox on the Super NES. Yeah. But Ocarina of Time was probably the first Zelda game that I picked up and could play well and play efficiently and just actually beat the game. I had to go back and beat the others later. The ones before it later. And it was just such an amazing experience at the time. Why? Well, one, it kind of blew my mind again because it was 3D. This was the first 3D Zelda. And for me, this was the first Zelda to. If. Here's my thing. A lot of people like A Link to the Past better. What I would say is what A Link to the Past brought to the series Ocarina of Time made it great. That would be my comparison of the two. Yes, A Link to the Past set up a structure that other mainline Zelda games would follow. It did set a template for the dungeons and the quests and the quest structure. And, what you expect out of a lot of power-ups and upgrades, what you expect them to do, things like that. Ocarina of Time made it great. That would be my comparison of the two. It brought it to 3D, the exploration to 3D. Yes, there were constraints on the 3D world. Yes, it was a smaller 3D world geometrically than compared to what you see in games today. I think I once saw that the entirety of Ocarina of Time's 3D landscape fits very neatly into the Great Plateau where you kind of learn to play Breath of the Wild, you know. And I'm not saying none of that's true, but at the time it actually felt like something big. And it expanded things you could do because it was a 3D world, I guess, and because of the extra CPU power the N64 gave at the time. You could ride a horse through Hyrule Field, which felt like a big field at the time. You could fight enemies with Z targeting, where you felt like dodging attacks was as important as landing attacks. Sword fighting was fun at the time. It really was. But you also had moments where you stopped, you went into first person view, you aimed with your slingshot or your bow just to land a hard to get shot. And all that is great. The hook shot, interesting, and A Link to the Past, fully realized in Ocarina of Time. That's kind of just how I see the two. And everybody likes to talk about Zelda art styles. To me, Ocarina of Time is the top. It didn't get better after Ocarina of Time. That's what I would argue. Yes, the graphics of the games did. But the original character art, illustrations, the focus on a colorful, kind of leaning more into anime and manga, I guess, but still has sort of this charm. It's like a timeless charm for me that never was fully replaced or outdone by later entries. Breath of the Wild and Skyward Sword cut close, but to me it's still Ocarina of Time for that. Also, I think Ocarina of Time just has one of the best plots a Zelda game has ever had. And you can watch several deep dive lore videos on YouTube where they analyze the script and the plot. I'll let you do that if you want. Here, I'll just say that the plot of Ocarina of Time is very poignant to me as a person getting into later years of life, looking back on his life. And the notion that as evil as Ganondorf was, the truest evil committed was all the things took away when so much of Link's life was took away, the years of time, by the end. And how you could argue Ocarina of Time was an attempt to try to get those years back. But even as you go back with reminders that everyone's time here has a limit. I'll leave it at that. It gets darker in places than you think if you want to delve into it. Majora's Mask kind of expands on it. A lot of people love Majora's Mask. If there's two least favorite Zelda games for me, that's one of them. But it did take a couple of small themes you get if you really look into Ocarina of Time and expand on them. I'll say it that way. It was the sequel to Ocarina of Time, no question in my mind. Wind Waker, that's probably another one that's kind of my least favorite column. I know I'm going to draw some hate. Don't hate me. I still love the game. I played the game. I played it end to end. Really enjoyed it. while I played it. And it's not about the art style. I was kind of cool with the art style even before. I understand why some people were irritated about it when it was first released, though, because if you were really following coverage of the GameCube, you saw a promotional video they showed at Space World where it was like epic Ocarina of Time style Link and Ganondorf having a legit sword fight. People wanted that. And with Wind Waker, I feel like you actually got that. There's parts of Wind Waker I really like. It was one of the best battles with Ganondorf there ever was. One of. The art style to me did allow for expression and things you didn't see in a Zelda game before. It had its advantages. It gave you visuals you wouldn't have gotten otherwise. The idea of Hyrule being victim to a great flood, I do not consider that a spoiler. And having to sail the seas to these islands, and the way Link kind of heals some of the damage done as he travels, was a good theme to me. But the pacing, the gameplay pacing to me was very off. The number of dungeons was kind of small. And I'm the kind of guy that, like, if I can get this number of heart pieces or the bomb bag to expand the number of bombs I hold, I want to try to get them early as I can. And if you follow that philosophy, there's a big gap in the middle of the game where you're not going to any dungeons or advancing the plot, and you feel like you're just running around to every random island trying to do side things. And not against side quests, but it's just the pacing did not feel right to me. I wasn't totally satisfied with the ending either. But, we can deep dive into that on another day. I'm just saying, I'm not the giant Wind Waker fan that other people's are, but I respect it. Twilight Princess, I enjoyed that game. It did try to be what I guess most GameCube people wanted for a Zelda post Ocarina of Time. It kept the mechanics, but expanded on them. It tried to make everything better. It gave a darker tone to its art style, to its themes. Like, if I thought there was dark things in Ocarina of Time, they tried to put it out in the open with Twilight Princess. And to me, it worked. It wasn't Ocarina, but it worked. Midna was one of the better companions I've seen Link have on his adventures. I don't think it was the best use of Zelda proper as a character in a game. I'll say that. The dungeons, the set pieces, everything, great. My number one criticism is for a game that expects you to hit the dungeons in a certain order and, expand your abilities as you go along that certain order. Most of your dungeon items really felt like use it in this one dungeon and you're done. Maybe a couple, 2 places in the overworld you can use them again and you're done with them. I feel like other games have handled the items a lot better than they did here. I don't know if it's because they ran out of time or what, but like the disc top thing you wrote on, it needed more places it could be used, in my humble opinion. It was just too good an item not to be used any more than it was. The ball and chain needed more places to be used than it was. That's kind of my main criticism of of Twilight Princess. And it had probably one of the best Ganon final boss battles there ever was. I believe that. And something I'll credit, and Wind Waker as well, going back to it for a second, they did both take the combat in Ocarina of Time and made it better. Wind Waker incrementally, Twilight Princess, to me, that's the combat Zelda. That's the Zelda game where you really feel like you have the most developed, thought out sword and shield combat system. Moving on to the Wii years with Skyward Sword. Also good. Keep in mind, I'm not saying any of these Zelda games are bad. It's kind of like saying this Ferrari is the worst Ferrari. Everybody's going to want one anyway. But Skyward Sword, like the impressionistic art style, I thought was good. It was kind of a step up from what, say, Twilight Princess was doing for me. I feel like it had a lot of ideas that could have used some more time in the oven. I enjoyed flying through the sky on the loft wing, but I wish the islands had more. Like I can agree, Wind Waker had more to do in its ocean than Skyward Sword had to do in the sky. Of course, Skyward Sword was splitting that up with the overworld. Skyward Sword, to me, the most important thing to note about its design is you could tell Mr. Aonuma, who's been in charge of Zelda's development for recent years, you could see his obsession with trying to get away a little bit from dungeons. He wanted the overworld to feel like the giant dungeon. He wanted the field to be more than just this space you run through to get to the next dungeon, which is why they had their own puzzles and challenges to overcome. And he did well with that. They created these, I wouldn't call it open world, but open zones. You can see sort of a Xenoblade influence. Monolith Soft actually helped with this game. I mean, you could see how it had these three very large, arguably four with the sky, large zones where you had to unlock dungeon-like challenges or work through them just to unlock sections of the overworld, let alone the dungeons, which to me did feel kind of open air in their design as well. There were some that were just clearly a dungeon. It was a sectioned off place from the rest of the map. But there were some that to me kind of felt like extensions of the overworld more so than they were a dungeon. So yeah, that was cool. I get it. It was kind of one of halfway between Twilight Princess and Breath of the Wild, where you just wanted Breath of the Wild, I think, or Twilight Princess. But the idea was good. The sword fighting with the Wii remote, it worked. It was something where I feel like you really needed the improved Wii remote with the extra accelerometer. You know, they made one for Wii Sports. There was an add-on you could get that would add to the motion control of the Wii remote and enhance it. But with that, sword fighting was good. There's still some waggle, but it was like smarter waggle. The way the items were used were good. The whip in particular for me was good. Yeah, to me it was great. It was pretty well executed overall, I would say. And the story, it's kind of an important one to the series. I don't think it's the best story. I just don't. But it's one where you want to experience that story if you're wanting to study the history of the Zelda series. It's kind of the closest thing we have at this point to an origin story for the series. So it explains why the things, to me, it offers, if every Zelda story, generally speaking to me, offers an explanation for something, like why are these other games the way they are. There isn't one game that explains why everything in the other games is the way they are, but most games explain one thing, if that makes sense. This one explains why everything repeats itself so much. Why do we see tropes over and over? Why do we see the Triforce, the power, wisdom, and courage? Why we see Ganon return over and over? I'm trying not to go into detail, but you kind of get the understanding of why these people keep reincarnating and coming back. I'll just say it that way. That's what this game did. Do I think the point A to B was the best I've ever had in a Zelda game? No. But it is a story everybody should experience. Do I think the sword fighting in the game was for everybody? No. Nintendo worked in analog stick controls for sword fighting in that game when they re-released it for Switch for a reason. But, it is enjoyable. Do I think the crafting elements were in depth and great? I think they were kind of shallow. Do I think the exploration aspect of the game was good? Yeah, on the ground and the sky, I thought it was lacking. So, were the dungeons good though? Yeah, some of the best in the series. Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword has some of the best dungeons in the series. Ocarina of Time has some classics too, but that is something that I think did improve over time. So, yeah, that's Skyward Sword to me. And then, of course, we got Breath of the Wild, followed by Tears of the Kingdom. I'll just talk about them both at once, if you don't mind. But Breath of the Wild was an eye-opening moment for me a few years ago when I got my Switch at launch. Not because of the greatly expanded world, not because Link was able to do things he couldn't do before, like fight with a staff or fight with a axe or fight with a club. Not even because of the what you might call the survival elements of the game, though I think they're well done. Took what happened in Skyward Sword and made it into something good. Like gave you a good cooking system, crafting system through cooking. And just through your interactions with different natural resources in the game that you come across. The eye-opening part for me was, well, two things, I guess. One is just the huge expanse of the map. That brought back the feeling I had when I first played Ocarina of Time. That brought back the feeling I had when I first played the original Adventure of Zelda. For those that don't know, when they were testing out the gameplay concepts of Breath of the Wild, they made a 2D graphic GUI to where the game played much like it looked and played like an original The Legend of Zelda game. Top down, overworld, used it to test out mechanics like cutting down trees to fall across a river to make a bridge. That's the original game is very much in Breath of the Wild's DNA. So when you have a huge 3D world, I call it huge still today, coupled with all the physics and rules and the feelings that you really can't do anything or go anywhere within reason, that you can interact with objects in so many ways that are within reason. It really captures the original feeling of exploring a vast world that The Legend of Zelda delivered upon 40 years ago. The plot, yeah, it's probably the worst. I say it's the worst. It's the least developed because it does fall to some of the open world game trappings where the plot is very vague. You can go anywhere, do anything. You get pieces of the plot that are not always in order as you traverse and explore the world. So it's kind of unique in that way. Though you do kind of get a setup in the same way the original Legend of Zelda gives you a setup before you start the game by reading its manual. Breath of the Wild gave you a setup in the first hours of the game before you really start to explore the world in earnest. Then you got extra lore along the way that the Legend of Zelda, quite frankly, probably couldn't provide on a technical level at the time at the same way Breath of the Wild could. So, to me, Breath of the Wild is a game that went back to the Legend of Zelda, took the core concepts and elevated them to something that goes beyond, in a gameplay sense, what Ocarina of Time, Link to the Past, Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker, Twilight, Princess, Skyward Sword were doing. Gameplay wise, to me, it blows the past ones out of the water. Do I think there's still a place for their traditional quest structures? Yes, I do. I'm not saying that you can never go back to them. But I do think people will have an expectation going forward that they keep what they were able to do with Breath of the Wild and grow upon it, even if it's just give you a different map. Tears of the Kingdom, I don't think it's being remembered as well as Breath of the Wild as of 2026. It does take what Breath of the Wild did and improve upon it. It does expand. It does add a sky layer. It does add an underground layer to the map. It does do things to change the map from Breath of the Wild, the ground. But the underpinning structure of the map is still there. So it does feel like a revisit to the same map. They do add this whole system of building things, which kind of takes you, I would argue, takes you away from the survival elements a little bit, though they're still there, because you're building machines to overcome the wilderness and the sky. But, the crafting's expanded. It's still there. It's actually deeper. Whether it's crafting items the old-fashioned way with the added feature of fusing items, or it's collecting ancient parts to build ancient machines that can overcome challenge. It just expands what you can do. And it does create more of a playground out of the map by doing those things. And it is a better plot. Sorry, it is a better plot than Breath of the Wild. But that's what objectively makes it a better game to me, all those things together. Though Breath of the Wild had the wow moment that will forever be etched in my mind. That's how those two games really play together to me. The next big moment goes to the next game that has a different map, I think, and that adds something new to the survival experience. I don't think the third Breath of the Wild is the answer. I think you go to a different time, a different Hyrule, a different map, find a way to make it truly different. Even if you keep the underlying systems. Different place. What would I hope to see if there was an announcement for the future? And I guess you can tell I never played the handheld Zeldas as much. I've tried to get into them more recently. Maybe I'll talk about them more in the future, but I was always more of a mainline console Zelda player. I'll give a special shout out, though, to the Minish Cap. I always thought that was a good one, which Nintendo didn't even develop. That was a Capcom game. I wish they would kind of revisit that style of game as well. But They kind of did Echoes of Wisdom, to be fair. By the way, I'm kind of surprised they never remade A Link to the Past, like the work Grezzo has done remaking Link's Awakening, Echoes of Wisdom, same era, and try not to spoil anything, but to me, remaking A Link to the Past should have been the easiest project to do with the work Grezzo had already done. I'm surprised we haven't seen that. But my hopes for Zelda as a series going forward, whether it's part of an anniversary celebration or just later, I hope the top-down style is never fully abandoned. I don't think it will be. I think they have Grezzo making these top-down games. So I'll just say, I hope they do remake A Link to the Past in the future, because I think that would be a good one people would enjoy. I think it'd be a little odd to do it after Echoes of Wisdom in a way, but I still think it should be done. There's been all kinds of rumors about a remake of Ocarina of Time. Would I like to see that? Yes. Like I say, it's one of my favorite all-time top 10 games. Would I like to see a remake that somehow improves it? Yes. I question whether they can. I mean, they did do a remake for 3DS that improved the graphics back around, I believe it was 2010 or 2011. So it could be done. But I don't think Nintendo would be satisfied though just to reskin it this time. I think they would want to try to add something to its gameplay, something to its map, quality of life, something. So I'm kind of wondering, will this ever actually be a better game? Would I like to art style, graphics? If they would just make it look like the old illustrations from '98, cel shaded even, I would be a happy man. Some people may not, but I would be. But that's kind of how I see the series right now. I'd like to see those two things happen. Link to the Past and Ocarina of Time get remakes. Obviously, I think there is a new mainline Zelda game in development. Could we see a touch of it this year? I think the timing is right. I think it could happen. I think it's more of a next year thing, though, because they want to get Mario out the gate. And that's kind of the theme. Like, I wonder if we'll even get a Zelda anniversary thing this week, because I think they're too busy. Like I know in yesterday's episode, I think they're too busy trying to get Mario out in the zeitgeist leading up to the Mario Galaxy movie, followed by probably a 3D Mario later this year. I think they could actually have that in the wings for later this year. So, to me, that's what they're doing, and they probably talked about Zelda later. I said we might have a general direct in April because of this. We may talk about Zelda then. Or they could get their own little direct later. Maybe that's what Nash Wheel heard about and doesn't know it. I don't know. But those would be my three hopes. A lot of people talk about Wind Waker HD, Twilight Princess HD coming to Switch 2. It might one day. I think it could come. I think it could come as part of this anniversary. But I feel like more likely is you get the GameCube version of Twilight Princess on Nintendo Switch Online. We got Wind Waker already. I think they would want to give that its day in the sun first before they did HD remakes. I know they were already done, but those could be done later in the Switch 2's life cycle and still people would buy them. I believe that. I do. And even if it's not A Link to the Past, I do believe Grezzo is probably hard at work at something of a smaller scale for a top-down Zelda, whether it's a remake or a newer game. We've already got a new game out of Echoes of Wisdom. I don't think they are done with that art style of a game. I'm not the hugest fan of that, by the way. It works, but you know, I do think they are not completely done with that style of game. So I do think there is something in the works. And with that, I'll conclude this episode of the Blue Knight Cast. I know I've been a little long-winded lately, and but I've been talking about things I want to talk about. If you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, hype it, share it. Show your phone to the person next to you and say, listen to this idiot, whatever you want to do. And thank you for sharing your time with me. Thank you for listening. And I'll try to have something out come tomorrow. Later.